Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 22 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. I'm one of your co-hosts, Sean, here with my other co-host, Sam. Sam, Super Bowl Sunday.
It is upon us. Who are you rooting for?
Eagles.
Eagles. Well, when this episode goes live, we will know the winner. And so you will either look prescient or foolhardy.
Like a fool.
Any particular reason why you're rooting for the Eagles?
You know, when my team isn't in it, I usually pull for the team that has had less success. So if the Chiefs have been to the Super Bowl like 4 times in the last 6 years or whatever it is, yeah, I'm going to pull for the Eagles. That's pretty much
Good. It's a good rationale.
Now, next year, when the Lions make the Super Bowl.
You heard it here first, people. Lions in the Super Bowl next year.
If we are telling fortunes, this is my soothsayer in me. Lions, Super Bowl champs.
They're on the upswing. A lot of reasons to be positive.
But the Lions are not why we're here today.
I was just going to say, no one listens to us for the football takes.
We are covering the last 3 episodes of season 2 of The Legend of Vox Machina. Now, Sam, I have to say, I think these are the 3 best episodes that Legend of Vox Machina has put out yet in either season 1 or 2. I thoroughly enjoyed these 3 episodes.
Yep.
And honestly, I can't pick out anything that I don't like or would change. That's how good I think these 3 episodes are.
These episodes are very good. I really liked the Briarwood final fight from season 1, but yeah, these are good episodes. We'll get into it, but
well, I'll even
a lot
say
of the
with
character
that,
stuff.
Yeah, with that take though, even with the fight, I think there's 2 fights in these 3 episodes that might be better than the Briarwood fight. But we'll talk about those as we get to them.
We'll talk about it. So do we want to do some quick plugs? Maybe a little news updates?
Sure, go ahead.
All right. So we are Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things on Facebook, Elves, Rings, Nerdy Things at gmail.com. We are also now on YouTube, Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. So if you've been following this podcast, please go on YouTube, give us a subscribe, give our videos a like, give them a watch. We have all of our back catalog posted already. We will continue to do that and maybe do some additional stuff in the future. Now that I have a haircut, I'm ready for prime time. And so YouTube. Also, big shout out and thank you to our subscribers via Buzzsprout, which is our podcast hosting service that helps us with editing technology, software, and various other costs associated with running and putting out this podcast. So thank you to those subscribers. If you would like to join them for a few dollars a month, please go to buzzsprout.com, search for Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. You can also find it through whatever podcast app or platform you're using to listen to us. So please do those things. Spoiler alert for the Legend of Vox Machina animated show, and then, of course, the Critical Role live play shows. And then we have one final bit of news. Sean, do you want to cover this?
So our last piece of news is there was a deal announced between, well, we posted about this on our Facebook page, but we didn't talk about it on the podcast. There's a deal announced between Amazon and Critical Role that we are getting the Mighty 9, which is campaign 2 of Critical Role, in another animated series format. The deal also announced possible film adaptations. And if they delve into that realm, that Amazon Studios will get first dibs on any of those projects coming out as well. So pretty exciting stuff. If you're a fan of Critical Role, D&D, if you really like Legend of Vox Machina, we're getting more. So if you were one of the couple thousand people that donated to the Kickstarter, you should be very happy about all of this new material that's coming out of that Kickstarter. So that's pretty much it. That's all the news.
All right. Well, let's jump into our recaps and discussions. So starting with episode 10, The Kill Box.
In episode 10, Vex, Vax, Keyleth, and Percy return to Whitestone, discovering it hidden behind an illusory shield. They enter and meet with Cassandra, Allura, and others. It's revealed that they have been gone for 3 weeks while only experiencing 3 days in the Fey realm. Allura locates via magic the other party members, and they see Grog challenging Kevdak. We cut to Restrun, where Grog is facing his uncle. Kevdak easily defeats Grog while Pike and Scanlan watch. The gnomes are discovered and seized by the herd while Kevdak impales Grog on a spike. Grog hears and briefly sees Earthbreaker Groon kind of in his head, who asks him, "Where does your strength come from?" Grog rages and grows in size. He re-engages with Kevdak, who uses the powers of the knuckles to grow. Kevdak again beats Grog and is about to kill him when Grog sees the rest of Vox Machina on the surrounding rooftops. When Kevdak asks why Grog thought he could defeat him, Grog answers, "Friends." As Kevdak is about to kill Grog, Grog shouts for Vox Machina to fuck shit up. Then they attack. The party is able to defeat many herd members, and Grog is able to sever one of Kevdak's arms, but is still unable to defeat him. Vex, seeing this, zaps Grog into her locket, briefly replacing Trinket. Vex flies up on her broom and then drops Grog onto Kevdak. Using the momentum, Grog slices Kevdak almost in half down the middle. He is victorious. He then declares Zanwar, Kevdak's son and his cousin, to be the leader of the herd, and invites them to slay a dragon. That night, the party and the herd are celebrating in a tavern. Scanlan is performing with Dr. Dranzel's band. He is flirting with Kaylee on stage. Keyleth is about to ask Vax to dance, but Vax has had a vision of the Matron of Ravens, and he leaves. Grog and Zanwar are talking about the dragon fight and announce that at dawn we plan. Kaylee and Scanlan retire to her room. Kaylee locks the door, and Scanlan hops on the bed in his underwear. She ties him to the bedposts while talking about her tough childhood. She then reveals she knew about him from her mother while putting a sword to his neck. And that is the cliffhanger that we leave off on episode 10. Sam, what was your biggest takeaway from episode 10?
Just how great that fight is between Grog and Kevdak when he discovers his strength, rages, pulls himself off of the spike, and then while he's defeated again, just that scene of him seeing the other 4 party members jumping around kind of in the shadows on the rooftop. And then,
oh yeah, they look like ninjas.
Yeah, no, that was so good. That was so good. That was to me just really great. It was slight deviation from the show. I think in the show, everybody was there at the beginning and they were kind of hiding and waiting to pop out kind of if and when it was necessary. And then similar to the animated episode that we're discussing, Grog is defeated and calls on Vox Machina to quote fuck shit up. But just that whole kind of great, it's kind of a series of people trumping increasingly higher trump cards. Like, okay, first we're just going to fight and I'm going to beat you up. And then Grog's going to rage. And then I'm going to use the knuckles. And then Grog's going to call for the Vox Machina to fuck shit up. And then, everything just goes crazy. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And that's the fight that I'm saying might be better than a Briarwood fight.
Yeah, I could see that. I just, maybe some of the Briarwood stuff is because I know what else happens.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, this was fantastic stuff. What was your highlight?
I don't know. So this was it was pretty much just one giant fight scene, this whole episode, right? So
yeah, it was a lot of fighting.
I mean, a couple of the things that fights moments that I really enjoyed, the Vex putting Grog in the locket and then dropping him from 200 feet to have him come down. Which
was taken basically shot for shot from the live play, which is just such a fun, because all of that stuff, was actually established. Vex had the broom, she had the Grog was doing very poorly in that fight, but then did come down. And I think in that moment, maybe he got advantage from falling, but I remember him, I'm almost positive he rolled a natural 20 in that hit and just did massive damage to Kevdak and actually killed him in that encounter, because it was perfectly epic. And that's happened a couple times with Grog. I'm thinking of one of those bonus episodes where the search for Grog that happens way in the future from what we're talking about now, when he just at the perfect moment, Travis Willingham rolls a natural 20, and it's just so poetically fitting for the what's happening.
And with that Grog moment, when he's on the huge spike, I don't know what you want to call it. It's like a defensive battlement kind of.
Yeah, like a barricade.
Yeah.
Palisade wall.
Gets hit through the abdomen on that, and they make it look like it's so slow motion when Kevdak is pushing him onto it, and you can see his skin on his stomach bulge out, and then it just rips open with the piece of wood sticking out. So to me, he's very close to death in that moment. And in terms of D&D barbarian rules, I'm wondering, does he level up? And this is his first use of relentless rage.
Yeah, I was
Do you
thinking
think?
something like
Yeah.
that, right? I know there's a fighter ability where you get additional hit points, but maybe I can't recall if there's a barbarian thing that does that. But there it was some type of enhanced rage, relentless rage, or
So I just Googled it.
oh, there you go.
Starting at 11th level, your rage can keep you fighting despite grievous wounds. If you drop to 0 hit points while you're raging and don't die outright, you can make a DC 10 Constitution saving throw. If you succeed, you drop to 1 hit point instead. So I guess maybe
Something along those lines.
something
Slight
along those lines.
slight liberal interpretation maybe of some of the strict
Yeah.
rules, but I mean, and this is kind of just a foreshadowing of the next, really the final episode of the season. But Grog takes a beating in the span of these 3 episodes, kind of already diminished from the stuff with the Craven Edge sword. Kevdak beats him into a bloody pulp. Luckily, Pike is there to do kind of healing over time, getting him back on his feet times over the course of these episodes. But that whole fight scene was great, and really pretty much faithful to the live play, which was mostly improv stuff.
And we also found out our Fate time travel. We know exactly how long it took them.
Yep.
3 weeks, which was also funny because it made me realize that whole like folksy song of the gnomes and Grog traveling took like 3 weeks.
Oh yeah.
So that was more than just like a day or two of traveling. That's like a long time. And at the moment I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Do we have like a timeline issue in the Legend of Vox Machina? And then I realized, yeah, we had that huge long song cutscene. So no time issues.
And it kind of explains how Western got so bad so quickly, seemingly. It's been 3 weeks since the herd has been there and the dragon has ruined it, and they really are coming down to like the final scraps of treasure, and very few people remain.
Yeah.
Although not so few people that you can't find a bunch of alcohol when needed to celebrate the.
We need to have a party.
Yeah.
Also, how tough would it be if you're one of like the citizens of Western still, and like this adventuring party comes in, kills Kevdak, but then parties with the rest of the Goliaths, and you're like, okay, cool. Well, my family's dead because of them.
Because of you people, the people who are now celebrating. They even paid.
Thanks for drinking with them.
Yeah, they paid a little homage to that idea when I think it was Scanlan or someone was one of the herd members was, oh, you almost killed me, or just 20 minutes ago I was trying to kill you, and I was like, yeah, and I was shitting my pants or something like that. There was kind of and maybe this was, I don't recall all the specifics, but I think there might have been a little bit more division within the herd, that there were only a few specific people that
stuck around.
Were fighting with like on Kevdak's side against Vox Machina in that big fight. There was a little bit more kind of standoffishness, and I think here, maybe for dramatic purposes, they needed to include more bodies for people to be engaging with Vox Machina. But I think really it was Kevdak, and then they had a shaman who was there that was healing Kevdak during the fight, and I think they were focusing a lot on that character, and then maybe a few other guards. But by and large, yeah, it was a little weird to be like, okay, we're doing some serious damage to one another, and then we're drinking together, and yeah, the citizens of Western are just kind of there, unable to do much to affect it.
And I see a note that you're complaining about an Irish accent again. So if you would like to take that one.
No, and this, I'm really trying to, I love the Irish accent. I just don't know if it works for Kaylee, because we don't really get a ton of we don't really have anybody else with an Irish accent, I don't think. And obviously we don't have a moment with Kaylee's mother to see that. And I think part of this is because I think Matt Mercer, people cast or maybe throw shade on his Irish accent. I remember that was a thing during the Mighty Nine campaign. Do you remember that at all?
I not in particular the Irish accent, but I know, like most DMs, like we made fun of your accents. So,
oh yeah, for sure.
I mean,
but I'm not a voice actor.
It's a common thing.
I need some acting skills. Yeah, I need to take some acting classes. I don't know how to empathize with gnomes. Yeah, it's tough. I think the other thing, Kaylee is just she's a challenging character because she's kind of in your face from the beginning, and at first you don't really know why with Scanlan, and then it makes sense once we get into the second episode. I think that's more of what I was reacting to, and then it's just the Irish, because then it just becomes it's a person who's being kind of tough for no apparent reason. And very quickly you see she's got this like bone to pick with Scanlan to a certain extent. And I think the Irish accent is just then become like, it's like a mystery wrapped in an Irish accent, kind of. And maybe that's me casting back on things that happen in the next episode that I wish would have ended slightly differently. But we'll get to that when we talk about the next episode, which, are we ready to move on to that?
Yeah, I'm ready if you are.
All right. So episode 11, The Belly of the Beast. The episode begins with Scanlan trying to talk down Kaylee, who we discover is actually Scanlan's daughter. Scanlan tells a story about how he'll never forget Kaylee's mom. Then he says that her name was Leah, but Kaylee's mom is actually Sybil. Scanlan realizes how awful he can be and tries to make it up to Kaylee, who says he'll need to do a hell of a lot right. Cutting back to Vax. Vax leaves the party following a thread of fate outside where he sees ghosts of the Goliath they killed in the uprising against Kevdak. We then cut away completely and we see a conversation between Thordak and Umbrasyl, which reveals that they have a little bit of a beef. Thordak wants the gold that is owed to him by Umbrasyl and wants Umbrasyl to stop wasting time with the vestiges of divergence. We then come back to Vax, who leaves the party and walks away from the tavern to visit the matron of Raven's temple. He's followed there by Vex and Keyleth, and when they confront him, he says he needs to enter on his own. Vax follows some priestesses further into the temple, discovering a shrine to the matron with a massive pool of blood in front of it. Vax walks into the pool and basically drowns in the blood, but is then transported to the matron of Ravens, where she tells him that as her champion, they must protect the sanctity of death and help people who cross over between life and death. We come back to the tavern, and Percy is developing a plan with a trap in which Umbrasyl will be ensnared. We cut to the next morning where they've actually built this trap, and the party is in hiding. Umbrasyl comes down, makes an attempt to leave, but then they trigger the trap, which restrains him. All of the party members and many of the Herd of Storms either alternatively attack Umbrasyl or try to keep him restrained. He eventually breaks out of the restraints and kills many of the members of the Herd of Storms. Their fight becomes desperate. Vax and Scanlan shoot themselves through Umbrasyl's anus using Scanlan's hand, and Umbrasyl is flying away with Vax and Scanlan inside of him, with Grog hanging on by an axe embedded in Umbrasyl's side, secured via a rope. So,
I have a couple things from this episode, just like quotes, that I think did a really good job of taking moments from the episode.
All right.
So my first one is that conversation between the matron and Vax, where she says, "Don't fear death, it gives meaning to life." Like, there's so many, you've realized in the first, well, not first two episodes, but ever since he found the vestige, he's had like these nightmares, seeing zombie images of himself. And then you have this moment where he basically dies. He drowns in a huge pool of blood, but he begins to recognize that she's not something to be feared. And that line from her does a really good job of conveying that to him as well.
Yeah, he definitely comes out of that encounter with a little bit more of a kind of acceptance of everything, right? The idea of, I think she uses the phrase fate touched when she's discussing him. And we have this imagery of the threads of fate that kind of connect Vax and other members of the party and everything. And you can see how it does give him comfort, although from a viewer's perspective, it might mean that some dark stuff is going to happen and he's just going to be okay with it.
And he kind of gets that way.
Yeah.
When and this is something from the next episode, but when they're about to go into Umbrasyl's lair and he's just like, "This is fate. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. We're supposed to be here." Okay. This is the new Vax. So yeah, we get that. And then my other quote was when Percy is sitting at the table, like describing his construction to trap Umbrasyl, and seems like he's been talking for a while, and then he looks around, he's like, "Everybody got it?" And then it was like all the Goliaths are confused, and then Krog just goes, "Dig here," and they're all like, "Oh yeah, okay," and they all leave.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah,
it's basically a giant bear trap. The thing with Vax and the Matron of Raven, something that occurred to me, especially during the vision that he has in the courtyard of the tavern, and then the explanation that the matron talks about kind of this transition and his position as her champion, it kind of is begging the question of, does he have like a Grim Reaper type role? Right.
Yeah. And I think they established that in the live stream.
Yeah. And the thing that really drove it home for me was his vision of people who had died earlier Like the Sovereign Uriel made another appearance as kind of this. It was a vision of him as a ghost, his soul, right? And so I guess it begs the question of, until he accepted this role, and we have yet to see him kind of usher the souls of the dead from the world of the living, the continent, to some other plane. Are there just a bunch of dead souls roaming around?
No, because we had
images
that Vax saw of the matron doing it.
Oh, of taking the
souls.
Yes.
Even
at the attack.
Yeah, when Uriel died,
right.
She wasn't leaning down to him, but she was leaning down to somebody. So I don't think it's the assumption that there's just like a continent full of ghosts now, but just having Vax as the champion, he will eventually like take up that job as well to go around and usher the dead.
Yeah. Which I guess
they do that in the live stream, because there's like I believe there's a conversation between, and again, spoiler warning, but there's a conversation between characters where I think it's like Scanlan or someone, they're like talking about Vax, and they go, when we die, we'll see him.
Yes.
So anyway, I just think they've established that, yeah, he's kind of like a Grim Reaper.
I wonder if we will see at any point him ushering these souls from the world of the living through that transition point.
I'm just maybe not like not while he's adventuring with Vox Machina. I doubt he's just going to like go off and, all right, guys, I'm going to go usher some souls. I'll be back in the morning. I don't think that's going to happen, but
yeah,
I don't know. But other way, good line by Matron of Ravens.
Yeah, and then that stuff, that whole philosophy really comes to bear in the next episode, which we'll talk about when we get to it. Mm-hmm. The other moment I liked here was the relatively short conversation between Vex and Keyleth outside of the temple, where they discuss Keyleth's feelings towards Vax and tells her to go for it, basically, to let him know how you feel, and it doesn't matter their desperate situation, which is kind of a reflection of the idea of this is their fate, this is their destiny, so you should embrace it. And she doesn't even have to be convinced. And we don't really see any signs of her being protective of Vax in that relationship. I guess we'll see how that develops if Keyleth does pursue Vax romantically. But that was nice. And then kind of a follow on from the moment where she wanted to ask him to dance, but he kind of walked away. You see her kind of struggling with her own maybe shyness to a certain extent, and her struggle with telling him how she feels.
Yeah, we got those moments with Keyleth and Pike when Pike was looking at Scanlan dancing with Kaylee.
We do.
Pike was starting to drink more heavily.
What are your thoughts about the scene with Scanlan and Kaylee?
It's one of the scenes from the live stream that I really liked. And when I was watching the episode with Carly, the last episode 10, I had hinted to her, because Carly didn't catch on about there being something between Kaylee and Scanlan. And I mentioned, oh yeah, that's Scanlan's daughter. That's just one of my favorite scenes, especially because it took Sam by such surprise during the live stream, because that's something that Sam Riegel, who plays Scanlan, didn't even know. And that's something that...
Is that right? They didn't discuss it ahead of time?
I don't think so. I think Matt dropped it on him.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, they could have discussed it ahead of time, but...
Well, it didn't seem like it did, because Scanlan, Sam genuinely seemed shocked.
Yeah. So, good scene from the live stream, and I was happy to see it in this. Very funny moment of Scanlan recanting this story of how he'll never forget Kaylee's mom, and she had such beautiful eyes and ears and hair, and then telling the story of, I finally knew what love was and the world just took us apart. I'll never forget Leia. And then Kaylee says my mom's name was Sybil. So it's like just that perfect Scanlan joke.
Well, but then he like rattles off a bunch of other names that are not the correct name of Kaylee's mom.
But then it's in that moment where Scanlan also realizes that he can be awful, and he's realizing that now. And then that, like, these last couple episodes really give us Scanlan's character arc, and I'm ecstatic to see where that's going to take us in the next like couple episodes and couple seasons. Because I mean, when we started this season, I had no idea where it was going to end. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it ends where it does, we still have so much material that we need to cover. So we possibly have seasons, 2, 3, maybe 4 seasons that we could go through of this show. So that's fantastic news for us.
Well, let's talk about looking ahead after we finish up episode 12, because that'll give us a good jumping off point. So is there anything else that we have to say about the
Oh yeah.
season? Oh, I see you have another point here. All right.
Episode 11. I've still got one more thing. Going into the dragon's butthole was one of the funniest parts of this fight scene. And we even get that when they enter Umbrasyl's anus, they cut to his face and he
That was
makes
so
like a
good.
kind of
Yeah,
face.
that was so good.
And I just want to say, having owned a reptile, their animation of a reptilian anus is so anatomically correct. I had a bearded dragon and their buttholes looked exactly the same. And I just want to point that out to the illustrators at Titmouse, that thank you for doing your research. It didn't go unnoticed.
That's representation.
But then once they're inside, yeah, like in the live stream, while they're in there, they're taking acid damage because they're inside of a black dragon and in its digestive tract. So besides like the acid that the dragon produces, you have like bile and other things inside the dragon's GI tract that can hurt you.
Yeah, and probably technically no air to breathe, but whatever.
Yes, technically, yeah, they probably should have not been able to breathe or talk in there, but
we'll give
this
it's
is
a fantasy show, so we'll say there's some oxygen inside of a dragon's inside.
And trust me, if Rings of Power, if they enter a dragon's anus, I will also give them the same leeway.
That would require some significant departures from the lore, but nothing should be written off. Who knows what they'll do?
Yeah.
We should start a petition on change.org. We demand more dragon anus in the Rings of Power.
In our fantasy settings.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's one of those in like D&D where you're starting to run out of ideas on how to fight something. And then someone just has an improv moment where they're like, oh, let's try this. And you try it. And
you have your other note here about the immovable sword. I mean, that was such a good reuse of that item.
Yeah. And it works for a moment until Umbrasyl is willing to just like take the damage and rip it out of him. I don't know. It's really hard because it's inside of him.
He has to like move through it. So like,
yeah. So it just like tears a hole through his entire torso, and that's the hole that they use to get out eventually.
Yeah.
But those were my last moments. Again, this wasn't the second fight scene that I was talking about as being better than the Briarwoods. It's the next Umbrasyl fight scene, but
still a good fight, right?
Still a good scene. Yeah.
We one thing we don't get a ton of is any sort of acknowledgement of all of the herd members that die. I remember that was something because in the show, or excuse me, in the live stream, I think this fight begins actually inside the city in the same area. And a lot of the herd members, as it was depicted in the show, are also killed. And I think there's a little bit of consternation about this, but they quickly just kind of move on from it.
Yeah.
All right.
Episode 12. This one is called The Hope Devourer. We open with a flash forward / dream sequence of Scanlan writing to his grandchildren who look like Kaylee. His grandchildren and Kaylee turn into Vax, who is telling him to wake up. Scanlan discovers that they are still inside Umbrasyl's GI tract. Grog is dangling by a rope tied to his axe, which is embedded in the dragon's back. He makes his way to Umbrasyl's back and begins attacking. Umbrasyl does some aerial maneuvering, and Grog plummets to the ground. Just before he hits the ground, he activates the Titanstone Knuckles and enlarges before impacting. This keeps him alive, but makes him very badly wounded. Vax and Scanlan try to escape Umbrasyl's acid-filled inside by cutting and eventually fisting with Scanlan's hand through the hole that the immovable sword made. They pop out and float in midair momentarily before Umbrasyl attacks them, and they fall. Scanlan is knocked unconscious. Vax communes with the Matron of Ravens, asking for her help. Wings sprout from his armor, and he grabs Scanlan just in time. The rest of the party, followed via flying broom and eagle form, they reunite, and Pike mostly heals Grog, but his leg is very badly broken. A compound fracture, I believe, right? Where the bone sticks out?
Yeah, it was pretty gnarly.
Yeah, I don't like that. That's too much for me. Vax wants to press the attack, but Scanlan disagrees. Vax decides to do some recon solo. He discovers Umbrasyl's acid-filled lair, decorated with a recently harvested Sphinx head. Vax is attacked by Umbrasyl and loses the upper hand. Vex, Percy, Scanlan, and Keyleth arrive and engage the dragon. Umbrasyl gains the upper hand again, and Vox Machina escape through a tunnel. Umbrasyl breaks and begins attacking the party again, because he used Mythcarver to discover where they were. Pike and Grog show up, but the party is obviously losing. Scanlan is struggling with staying or fleeing. He seems to begin to run. Umbrasyl seizes the bow and knuckles, the other two vestiges held by the party. The party is about to be bathed in acid, but Scanlan steals Mythcarver and stabs Umbrasyl in the eye. He kills the dragon, but is seemingly killed in the act. Pike goes to him in the moment and has a moment, but he reveals that he is still alive. The party discovers Umbrasyl's dragon hoard. Vax and Scanlan have a moment, their friendship seemingly repaired. The party returns to Whitestone, greeted by Keeper Yenin, Cassandra, toasts Vox Machina, but Yenin is revealed to be Raishan in disguise. That is the green poison and dragon. Raishan offers her assistance in killing Thordak, hinting that the red dragon has a mysterious plan. We end with the white dragon Vorugol bringing Thordak tribute and news of Umbrasyl's death. Thordak mentions an army, and we see there are dozens of nearby little dragon eggs waiting to hatch. And that is our cliffhanger for season 2 of The Legend of Vox Machina. 1 dragon down, 3 to go. One of those 3 might be an ally. And what happened to Yenin? There's so many questions.
There are so many questions. Let's start with, I guess, the dragon fight, or the mid-air fight and the pursuing of Umbrasyl. What were your notable moments during this sequence?
I guess this is one of the notes that you made, but I had a similar interpretation of the event. Was vestiges of divergence in the live stream. When you initially attune to them, they're pretty basic, but the more you do with them, the more powers you can unlock. And it seems like you noted that Vax is unlocking a new phase of his vestige when the wings pop out. So yeah, I thought that was cool. And if you followed the live stream, you probably took note. Otherwise, you probably looked at it and just thought, oh, he just discovered it can do something.
Yeah, and my other thought here, and I mentioned it in my notes, is it the vestige leveling up, which it easily could be. It could also be him, the vestige is leveling up, but then there is also this moment that precedes that where he is communing with the matron of ravens. And I'm wondering if that is kind of how they're showing him, because in the live stream, he takes a level of paladin and he announces it during the Umbrasyl fight, actually when he's poking his head out of Umbrasyl. So I kind of thought that was maybe a way of interpreting this, but they're probably not going to be talking about different character classes as much. So that is maybe even more inside baseball and something for the live stream watchers and the kind of D&D fans. But either way, we show him kind of entering this new stage of being the matron of or the champion of the matron of ravens and having that his wings. And I think even eventually Vex says oh, I just get a broom and you get wings. But now, yeah, we've got some pretty great aerial moments here with everybody can fly, basically. Or not everybody, but they're very mobile now with the eagle form, the broom, Scanlan's hand. They're really using that a lot to show him getting around on it, which I wonder how many people in D&D are now going to try to do that.
I mean, also with Scanlan's hand, we have the fisting moment.
Which, nice fisting. Great quote by Vax.
As they're trying to get through that little opening that the immovable sword made, and the acid is slowly approaching, Scanlan's hand turns into a fist and fists Scanlan and Vax through the little opening in the little hole. That's how they save themselves, which is pretty good.
We again see Grog taking a huge amount of damage in that fall. He looks messed up pretty badly. He's covered in blood. You mentioned the compound fracture, and Pike really did some work to stitch him up.
But she's tapped out, and that's an important part.
Yes.
And they do a very good job of pointing that out earlier in the episode, where she can't even fix the broken leg. They have to make a splint for it to keep it in place. And Pike is out of spell slots for healing. And then they get into that moment of that argument between Scanlan and Vax, where do we continue to fight Umbrasyl or not? That goes back to a D&D concept of, if you rest, so is the enemy. So if you have done all this damage to Umbrasyl and you're not ready to go fight him, and you take a half day to do a short rest or whatever, a couple hours, that's a couple hours that your enemy is also like resting and recuperating and gaining hit points.
And they show that. They show Umbrasyl healing himself, healing the wounds of the sword and everything else.
Mm-hmm. So they decide to attack. And throughout these 3 episodes, we're really starting to get that divergence from Vax and his sister and Vax and the party to Vax kind of being on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And with all of those like threads of fate things that they've been introducing, I don't know. And I think that also goes into like why Vex was less protective of Vax with the whole Keyleth conversation. Because I think Vex is also realizing that her and her brother are growing apart.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We're getting some good stuff. And that Umbrasyl fight, this last one where they end up killing him, to me, the battle with Kevdak and this fight with Umbrasyl might both be better than the Briarwood fight.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just like a sheer crazy things that are happening fight. Absolutely. Maybe. And just the ups and downs. I'd say the ups and downs in all 3 of those fights are pretty good and very dramatic. There's a mention made about splitting the party. I think Scanlan says, "Oh, we're going to split the party," when Vax goes in and then the other Vex and Keyleth and Percy go in. But that moment where I don't know who is in danger, who's being threatened by Umbrasyl, but then Pike and Grog show up, and for momentarily they kind of get a respite, and then they recover and flee or kind of regroup. That was really good. They do a really good job of this, of showing, and it doesn't get old, which is probably a testament to their ability to keep these things interesting and to make the fight seem different. But there's always this kind of back and forth, and they have to rally, and it's a question of who in the group is going to step up and do something to change things, right? Like with Vex kind of pulling Grog out of there and then dropping him onto Kevdak, and obviously everything that Grog had to go through to find the strength to get through that fight. And here with Scanlan showing up after we basically see him walk away, right? Yeah. He kind of rejects the message of it's our fate to fight this dragon. Vax trying to motivate them to carry on, but then he has a change of heart and he shows up at the end and reclaims Mythcarver and basically explodes Umbrasyl's face.
Which is a huge joke throughout the live stream too. People almost forget that Scanlan has Mythcarver because he rarely uses it.
Never. Yeah.
Like there's moments where 30 episodes will go by and Scanlan will be like, "I'll attack with my sword." And everybody's like, "What? You have a sword?" It's like, "Oh yeah, I've had it this whole time. I just never use it."
I mean, do you remember the fight in the 9 Hells? Or it's either the 9 Hells or it's on the Plane of Fire, where he uses Mythcarver because he's like out of spells, everybody's unconscious, and he uses Mythcarver. And if he had I think he activated it because I think Matt said that he was doing it because he was thinking of Kaylee and like trying to get back to Kaylee. This is spoilers for something that happened in the live stream. Don't know if they're going to do this in the show, but then that was when I think they kind of adapted a little bit of that dramatic sense of Mythcarver responds when it's claimed and it's used for a purpose, which really fits in with the idea of this is their fate, this is their destiny. I think Vax has a moment where he says, Grog and his uncle, we and our father, all the connections that they have to the vestiges and to what they're doing. It's as if somebody was telling their story. And we do get a pretty interesting reference to that with Scanlan reading the book.
Yeah.
Just to remind you, it's as if somebody wrote this stuff. And of course, that's reflecting the fact that this was all the brainchild of a very good storyteller and dungeon master in Matt Mercer. Oh, okay, so are we good with the big discussions and we can go into the little things now?
Yeah.
Vax had a line. I think Scanlan said something about getting lucky, and Vax says there's no such thing as luck, which is funny because famously Vax and Liam O'Brien took the lucky feat, which allows you to re-roll, and he would do it often to the point where fans were like, "Hey Matt, I'm sure you're going to ban lucky in the next campaign, or the luck feat." And to his credit, I don't think he did, and nobody really took it. And then it did tie well into that idea of the fate touched. But this was a nice little send off to that idea of the lucky feat. Oh, we haven't mentioned Ripley in our discussion. Dr. Anna Ripley, who is seen multiple times in these 3 episodes, but then never makes an appearance during a confrontation. She's not there when Umbrasyl is. She's not there when Umbrasyl escapes the trap. Is she? Is she on his back?
No, not when he escapes the trap. When he lands.
She's with him when he's recovering, but then she's gone when Vox Machina arrives and has their fight. We don't really see her kind of escape, do we?
She's there.
Do you see her?
When Bristle dies, they cut to her standing behind a stalactite.
Oh, I didn't see that.
And she's like looking down at them, and then we assume she just escapes. Yeah.
Okay. And they're focused on the recovery and the treasure.
Yeah, because they're distracted by the treasure hoard. But she's up in the cavern, like watching everything happen.
Okay. I just didn't see that. Yeah. Okay.
So we do get Ripley, and like we've said in previous episodes, this is a much different Ripley storyline than we've had. So even Sam and I don't really understand where this is going to go. So it'll be intriguing, to say the least.
Yeah. And other things that some of which we know a little bit about, and some of which I think there's maybe they're fleshing it out from the live stream. We do get the reveal that Raishan has infiltrated Whitestone. This was something that maybe we hinted at in prior episodes. I can't remember if we explicitly said it, but this goes all the way back to the first episode of this season, where the party is escaping from their keep in Iman to Whitestone, and we see a little girl with bright green eyes walk through the portal, and Grog said something to her, and then she scampers off. And I think we then see that little girl again at a later point in Whitestone. And then at the final moments of this episode, we get the reveal that indeed she has infiltrated Whitestone and has even taken the place of Keeper Yenin. Hopefully Keeper Yenin is still alive. This was not how it was done in the show, in the live stream. What was her character? What was her alias in the live stream? I know she took the form of a dwarf at one point.
I don't remember. It's been so long.
Yeah, I don't remember how she infiltrated Whitestone. But yeah, cool reveal of her draconic features. And I think in the live stream, it was established that she was afflicted by some sort of disease that stunted her growth and caused her pain. And I think there's a little bit of an homage to that with her. There was kind of green veins on her face. It looked like she had been afflicted by something. And that was a cool little tidbit. I don't know if we're going to get an expansion of that.
Yeah, because that whole concept, the only reason Raishan is working with Thordak is because he said he had a cure for whatever her curse was, but he's like withholding the thing from her. And now she's vindictive and wants to get him back.
Yeah. She says that she hates him more than they do, which could hint at that. And we might get that in the future seasons. And then the idea of Thordak and this, he calls it an army, and we can assume it's related to the eggs that we see. So these are either dragons or some sort of dragon-like creature. I think they did discover eggs in Thordak's lair in the live stream, but we never really get a sense of their purpose. I don't think we ever encounter anything that hatched from one of those eggs. Not to say that I think that was a hook in some of the Taldore campaign settings was, some of those eggs survived, and there's something that came out of them.
But that leaves us with 3 dragons. And if they killed 1 dragon in this season, if they kill a dragon a season going forward, we have 3 more seasons, which I don't think that'll be the case. I think they'll expedite some a little bit here.
Yeah. But I could see the Vorugal fight with the white dragon. I could see that taking very little time.
Yeah.
And the rest of the season is Thordak and Raishan.
Yeah. It's exciting though. I am happy to see where we left off. It's good to know how much more we have left.
How does this season overall compare to season 1 for you?
I liked it more than season 1.
Yeah. They definitely, I mean, it's always those initial kind of growing pains are tough, and establishing these characters for some new audience members, but then also the fans of the live stream is going to be a challenge, because you don't want to assume that your fans know everything from the live stream. And of course, so that means that some of those initial episodes in season 1, I don't want to say fits and starts, but it was definitely a lot of growing, and now we're really kind of into it. And I think we can expect the stakes to heighten, right? I think we've talked about this idea of in Dungeons and Dragons, first you're the local heroes, then you're the regional heroes, then you're the kind of global heroes. And we're starting to get in that phase where they're going from the regional to the global heroes. So we're going to see them hit new heights of power, taking on the remaining 3 dragons and whatever other dangers come their way.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to be here for every step of the way.
And we will. Do we have anything to say as we close out?
No, just that next week we will be covering the Rankin and Bass animated Return of the King. So look out for that. Then Sam and I kind of need to figure out where we're going to go with the podcast, if we're going to pick up a new series. Sam's got a baby on the way. So, Sam, your child is really going to have an impact on my podcasting hobby. So
I'm sorry. I apologize.
I better really like this niece or nephew.
Well, I'll say this niece or nephew better really like the Lord of the Rings, because that's what they've been hearing for the past several weeks. We are slowly making our way toward Mount Doom. And so maybe, who knows, future listener, maybe I'll do my best to indoctrinate them into the Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things fandom. But yeah, so we've got some options ahead of us and some decisions to make. But either way, I think we're still going to commit to putting out content, even as things get a little crazy. We've got Return of the King, and then
we'll figure out from there. We still have that, because when we decided to do Legend of Vox Machina, we pretty much disregarded the poll that we did.
Yeah, and I think at that point there was some questions about when the season 3 of The Witcher would come out, and that's been confirmed for
this summer.
Late summer, basically. Yeah. Like, it's August, so we've still got some time, a lot of time for that to happen. And in the meantime, new stuff has come out. I don't know if anybody is listening or watching all of us, The Last of Us. Great show. There might be something there to discuss. But yeah, we will see where Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things takes us. But please stick with us and let us know your thoughts and your feelings about what we should be covering. Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things on Facebook, Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things at gmail.com. Find us on YouTube, and we will talk to you in the future.
Bye, everybody.